So I'm sure that most of you saw the televised spat between the President of Ukraine and the President of the United States and the Vice President of the United States, which the President of the United States was duly elected, and currently the President of Ukraine is not duly elected. Those of you who don't know, is elections were canceled in Ukraine, but also in another NATO country. Elections were canceled in Romania, and the opposition was just arrested, and like 50 some people in his party were arrested. Now, I am not a Democrat or Republican. I am a Zionist. That's what I am. But I am an observer. And the folks who believe in democracy, as they say, are shocked and dismayed about how the Europeans are acting. They're acting like the Russian president, making sure that only their people can run for office. And of course, the current ruling party in the United States is looking at the imbalance of NATO funding, and they're asking themselves whether there should be even a NATO at all or not. In the last couple of videos, I pointed out that NATO is essentially dead, or that folks are saying that NATO is essentially dead. Now, I've warned anyone who is a Jew by blood or practices Judaism to not entangle themselves in the world of a Roman Republic or Greek democracy. In so doing, you have become, let me say this again, when you do participate in this, you become a Hellene. You become a Hellenistic Jew. And the prophet Daniel, Gabriel, did not speak very highly of these particular Jews. And I will leave it at that. So, what I want to do is play this video first. A whole lot of other news organizations have their own say about this, but this is probably the most, or the least political, I should say, of statements of analyzation of what just happened with these negotiations between President Zelensky, or former President Zelensky, because he's essentially not the elected president anymore of Ukraine.
Let's bring in U.S. Army Special Forces veteran Jim Hansen. Jim, it was quite a day. What's your reaction to what happened?
That was the most stunning political mistake I've seen in my lifetime. It was the equivalent of a diplomatic walking into the Oval Office, dousing himself in gasoline, and lighting a match. You know, there's a piece of advice people get that says never get high on your own supply. And I think Zelensky's been reading his own press releases and believing the hype. And he's had too many people in the Biden administration and in Europe telling him he's the greatest thing in the world as he runs around, dressed up like an army man. I think he just really gave Ukraine an incredibly damaging blow.
So you wonder if he's going to be pushed aside. Maybe Ukraine sends its generals in to negotiate, because now there's no way Zelensky can move forward in negotiations. Foreign policy pros tell us. He was the U.S. ambassador. Ukraine's ambassador to the U.S. was caught on camera. Let's show it. Grimacing in shock at what Zelensky was doing. It is a brutal 3-year war. If we have the footage, look at this. If you take out Trump and Vance, why did Zelensky decide to pick a public fight in front of the cameras in the Oval Office? Is he exhausted, or is he going along with the anti-Trump wing in Europe and America? It's not Joe Biden reading off of note cards and index cards anymore. It's President Trump.
Yeah, I haven't found anyone who can come up with a legitimate reason for him to do something this gobsmackingly stupid. President Trump was throwing him a lifeline. This mineral deal would have put U.S. companies in Ukraine, which would essentially be better than troops. They're less threatening to Putin, but they serve the same purpose. President Trump would never allow Putin to invade and put American companies in danger. He's throwing that out the window. I have no explanation other than he's lost his mind.
Jim, Senator Lindsey Graham says Zelensky should either resign or not be in the negotiations. Let's talk about this. Polls from Quinnipiac, Marquette University, Pew Research, Ipsos show the majority of Americans demand the U.S. stop funding Ukraine. Ukraine can't win this war alone. The U.S. will not start fighting Russia, full stop. No one wants World War III. President Trump said that. The only answer right now is mark the boundaries now, stop fighting, do Trump's peace and prosperity deal. We know that Zelensky tweeted, quote, "Thank you, America," after the fight, but Trump is accusing him of pushing the world to the brink of World War III. What do you think?
I think he absolutely has. There's no question the only person who benefited from this little tirade he threw was Vladimir Putin, who now holds the cards that Zelensky threw up in the air. It's time for him to step aside. He did a magnificent thing. He rallied the world behind Ukraine when Russia invaded, and he should get credit for that. But what he's doing now is throwing all of that away in a sad display of a lack of diplomacy and the ability to understand the people you're in the room with. The most powerful man in the world was willing to help you, and you disrespected him in front of an entire live television audience. That was crazy. It's still
a mystery. I mean,
Okay, so you get the full scope of what seems to have happened. Now what I want to do is play another video. I have some things to say and things to show you in the history. I'm just going to play just one little small portion here.
It must have been very hard for a Labour Prime Minister to go and flatter a very right-wing American president in the way that he did. But is that what is required to sort of make nice with Donald Trump?
Well, yes, I mean, that's what both French President Macron and Prime Minister Starmer have done this week. They've come in with bearing gifts, they've come in with sweet words, with lots of flattery, lots of enthusiasm. And, that did work for Prime Minister Starmer yesterday, and interesting, and I think there's a nice sort of comparison here. Starmer came and he presented Donald Trump with a letter from King Charles inviting him for a state visit. Zelensky came and also presented Trump with an envelope. This envelope contained pictures of the conflict, and as we understand it, casualties from the conflict. So it's a very, very different approach that Zelensky was going for, and a much more combative one. And as we can see, that hasn't worked out well for him right now. I mean, who knows what happens in the long run, but, it...
Okay, so you kind of get the gist of what's going on. Now, here I have a little comment to make, a little commentary. The world should have learned the lesson concerning the United States. Why the United States, and look, I'm a Zionist. I'm not a pro-United States person. But I am a historian. Okay? I do read history. But the world should have known that the whole reason for the existence of the United States of America to begin with was to get away from the European monarchies, their politics, their everything, to get away from them, to get away from their religious persecution. That was the whole purpose of it. Except that the King George didn't realize it until he got his butt kicked. But nobody ever seems to learn this. Now, in World War I, the United States of America did not want to get involved, Now they got Russia. They got Russia involved early in World War I. Europeans did. What happened? They pulled out. They left Europe to their own devices. Fortunately for Europe, the United States was dragged into that war, kicking and screaming, did not want to participate at all. And, well, it finalized the outcome of that war. Then comes, not too many years later, World War II. The United States did not want to get involved. Why? Because there is a certain mistrust that Americans have for Europeans. Americans are not as interested in war. I'm not saying that they're interested in war. They most certainly are. But they're not as interested in war as the Europeans have always been. The United States would have never joined World War II had it not been for Pearl Harbor. Never would have happened. Never would have happened. Now, here we have what's already World War III, even by Joe Biden's own definition. He said if we send our tanks into Ukraine, that would be World War III. Well, they did. So it's World War III. Okay? The mistake was to drag the United States of America in early because the people of the United States are not interested in European wars. They never have been. And they don't want to be dragged into it. Why? Why is that? It's something called Washington Doctrine of Unstable Alliances. The Washington Doctrine of Unstable Alliances was a foreign policy that advised the United States to avoid permanent alliances with other countries. This policy was based upon the idea that the United States should only form temporary alliances when necessary. So why did the United States form the NATO alliance? Thomas Jefferson reaffirmed George Washington's farewell address with his own 1801 inaugural address by restating the Washington Doctrine of Unstable Alliances, asserted that the U.S. should consider its external military alliances to be temporary arrangements of convenience and should freely abandon or reverse them. You see, folks, there are some people in American politics that read history, and there are some who do not. And there is obviously nobody in Europe that reads American history. And this is the reason. The American people do not want to be entangled in foreign wars. Now, Mike Martin of the UK Telegraph says NATO is dead, but there is still time to build a real European alliance. We need a new European Atlantic Treaty Organization with Britain leading. So no longer the United States would be leading, but Britain would be leading. But as you know, in World War I and World War II, especially World War II, with the UK at the lead, before the United States got involved, the Allies were losing. Article 5, the collective defense that sits at the heart of NATO, is dead. And that is correct. And if Article 5 is dead, I want you to listen to me correctly. I want you to listen to me intently. Excuse me. Article 5 is dead. Why? Because all these NATO countries were completely dependent upon the United States of America to come and save them with Article 5. Article 5 is dead. The quicker everyone understands this, the better. Well, the outcome is not going to change, folks. The message from the Munich Security Conference last weekend was that European leaders, generals, and senior policy makers no longer trust the Americans to support the European security architecture which has existed since the Second World War. Wait a minute. Did you see what I just saw? Can no longer trust the Americans to support the European security architecture. That's exactly what's been going on. It is the United States of America that has been doing the supporting of the European security architecture. It hasn't been them. The Trump administration is a revolutionary one which seeks to replace existing governments across Europe with parties more favorable to the right, far-right MAGA agenda, they say. No, that's not exactly true. Trump represents a group of people who do not want to get involved in foreign wars and who don't want to start a nuclear war. That's what it is. The nuclear war is going to happen. I'm here to tell you it cannot be stopped. It's just that the Americans don't want to participate in a nuclear war. And he says, indeed, Trump, Vance, and Musk regularly repeat Russian talking points. We are in an extremely dangerous situation where the winds of war are once again blowing through our unprepared continent. Yes, they are always unprepared, and they're always looking for somebody to bail them out. But the fatal mistake that Europe made was dragging the United States into this war early. They should have learned in history that the only way that Europe will ever be able to depend upon the United States of America to help them in a war situation is when it's the last and only final option. When the United States of America becomes the last and final option for Europe. When Europe has expended all the other options, and for some reason the other side brings the United States into a war. Now what Europe has done, they dragged the United States of America into a war that the people do not want to participate in. They voted for somebody who does not want to participate in it, and now that somebody is going to walk the United States of America out of that war. Now, is the United States of America partly responsible for this war? Yes, it is. In fact, very much so. So, we go to the National Security Archive, NATO expansion. What Gorbachev heard, now I cannot sit here. This thing is so long. You need to look at this title, Google it, and read it for yourself. But Gorbachev was promised that if they set West Germany free, if they broke down the Berlin Wall, that NATO would not expand a single inch further. We all know this is true. James Baker said it. You can go down and read through this whole, it's very, very, very long, and I'm not going to go through all of it. I'm just giving you something to work with here. And certain globalist presidents, like George H.W. Bush, well, after Reagan, all of them after Reagan, pushed for NATO expansion until we have what we have today. So, what does that have to do with salvation of Israel? My whole point today is to remind everyone how quickly things can change. How much things can change overnight. So how does that affect the outcome of the end times? Talked about that last week. Ezekiel 38. And the word of Jehovah, not the Lord. See that? Or actually it should be said, and I have to learn to say it correctly, Yehovah. You see how the last part of the word is accented, or the last syllable is accented. Came, saying, Son of man, set your face against Gog. Now who is Gog? I did several videos proving who Gog is. The one who holds the ribbon of St. George, because George is Gog. But also the Republic of Georgia and nations like Norway and the Netherlands, which are NATO signatories. The land of Magog, Rosh, captain of Meshech, or Meshach, and people say that Meshach is Moscow. And some people claim that Tubal is Tbilisi, others say it's another city in Russia. I don't know. And prophesy against them, saying, Adonai, Jehovah says, Gog, or George, Rosh, captain of Meshach and Tubal, you will return, and I will put hooks in your jaw, and bring you forth. Bring forth your army, your Sus, your warbirds, your warplanes, and Parash, horsemen, cavalrymen, all of them clothed with armor and all of that. Persia is your ally. That tells you who that is. Cush and Libya, Put, will be there too. But also, and folks, I cannot express to you enough how foreign policy in nations can change at the drop of a hat. Gomer. Let's look up Gomer, son of Japheth. Was the oldest son of Japheth. It was the father of Ashkenaz. That's the Germanic tribes. Ritheth. That is so the Anglo-Saxons, the Saxons are a German tribe. The Anglos, well, partly German and part Ritheth. And the Celts are Ritheth. So are the Gauls that are in France. Not all of France are Gauls, but a fair amount of Gauls are in France are from Ritheth. So this includes the Germanic tribes and the Celtic tribes and Togarmah. Now there is some concern about who the house of Togarmah is. Well, the best thing we can understand is Togarmah, it says, of the north flank, extreme parts. Now, some people say it's Turkey. Is Turkey going to participate? Yes, it is. Okay? How do I know this? I know this by what is written in the 6th vial of wrath in the book of Revelation, where it says the king of Anatolia crosses over the Euphrates River. I wonder what for. Okay? So what we have here is we have an alliance between the Europeans and Russia. What happened? What happened? Is there going to be? Folks, I don't know how to explain this, but I have a feeling. I don't have the ability to predict. I just have a feeling that there's going to be overthrowing of governments in Europe. Because look at what just happened in Romania. Do I need to go and tell you what happened in Romania? I did, but maybe I should show you. Opposition arrested and Romania. You can see right here. Romania police take far-right presidential frontrunner in for questioning. They canceled the election. Romania cancels election. Look at this. Look, Romania prosecutor probe canceled election frontrunner. This guy was going to win, so they canceled the election. Why? Because it was claimed that he was pro-Russia. That's what they claimed. And looky here, Romanian far-right presidential frontrunner taken into custody after J.D. Vance's rebuke of European elections. If you would listen to what J.D. Vance said about European elections, you would know that they have participated, these European countries have participated in wholesale election fraud. And then if you dig into it, you will find out that it's so. In fact, it's happened here in the United States. Everybody knows this. And you see right here in December 6, 2024, why Romania just canceled its presidential election. See that? Is trying to guard against Russian election interference, but such a drastic, unexpected, and last-minute move risks undermining people's faith in democracy. Right. You see, folks, they can't stop what's going to happen. In fact, I cannot make any predictions, but based upon Ezekiel 38 and 39, the European Union and Russia are actually going to have an alliance, albeit an alliance kind of like this. There is no honor among thieves. You know, kind of like the way that Russia and Nazi Germany's Molotov or Ribbentrop-Molotov alliance. I have to go look it up. Molotov Pact, yeah. Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. A non-aggression pact between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. In fact, this has to happen between Russia and Russia being the dominant one instead of the United States of America. That's what we can glean right here. If we are reading this accurately, if we're reading this correctly, we can presume that Russia will be the head of this new pact because the European Union is partly strong and partly broken, as is written in Daniel 2. They don't have the power anymore. They need somebody else to help them. They need a superpower to help them. And the European countries, the current with the exception of the UK, but that's probably going to change since Keir Starmer has announced the need for a draft. What is the word that they use over there in Europe? Mobilization, something like that. A draft. And of course, do you think that the British young men are going to go for that? No, see, they're not going to try to fight against Russia. They're going to join up with Russia to fight against the little guy. That's right. The little guy. And that is the reason for the whole prophecy of Ezekiel 38 and 39. And when you read, and as I pointed out, I showed it to you how Gomer is much of the 10 kingdoms of Europe. So if we go to Ezekiel 39, you will see that when they fail here, when their invasion of Israel fails, and Israel has to loose the Samson option on them, to send a fire on Magog and among them that dwell in security in the coastlands. In the coast, what's that? What's he talking about? He's talking about the Roman Empire. You see? So Magog is going to be set on fire, and these nations here are going to be set on fire. The Roman Empire. And when that happens, folks, you can bank on. Watch this. Revelation 9. Strong's Concordance. This happening. And the sixth messenger sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar which is before Elohim, saying to the sixth messenger, which has the shofar, loose the four messengers which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And the messengers were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year, for to slay the third part of men. And the number of the cavalry were 2, not 200, 10,000. So apparently 10,000, is it plus 10,000? Is it times 10,000? I don't know. And I heard the number of them. In this way, I saw the horses. In this way. So now he's going to describe what he saw as he describes his horses. Were they horses in the classical sense? Obviously not. That's why he said he's going to describe them in the vision. That which was seated on them had breastplates of fire. Breastplates of fire, huh? Well, look what we have here. Well, I would like to get a closer look. Can I get a closer look of this one? Still can't get a close enough look. Oh, there we go. So what you have is here is there's the color of fire, red, right? Now listen carefully. Breastplates of fire, of jacinth, and brimstone. Okay, now we look up jacinth, let's get all the images up. Now, this particular jacinth has black, red, orange, red or orange, and yellow. This one is only black and yellow. What color is brimstone? It's yellow. So apparently the jacinth is that of black and yellow. What do we see here? Black and yellow. So we have the color of fire, red, black and yellow on the breastplate. Is that a breastplate or not? That which was seated on this horse had a breastplate of fire, jacinth, and brimstone. And what is this? This is a Yars ICBM. What is it used for? To nuke the world. And the heads of the horses were like the heads of lions. Lions have wide heads. Wide head, not narrow head. And out of the mouth came fire and smoke and brimstone. Let's look at the mouth of this. I gotta go and see if I can get that better picture again. Hold on. Well, I guess I lost that. I gotta pull it back up again. All right. So this is the mouth right here. Right? So this sets inside the mouth. Now we go back to for the power is in their mouth and in their tail. What do you mean the power is in their mouth and in their tail? Upright ICBM. Well, as you see with this one right here, that which sets inside the mouth becomes its tail. I don't know if I can get well, there's another one right there. But when it's set all the way up, it looks like a tail. Okay? I know many of you young folks should pay attention. We'll do Yars ICBM upright. Let's see if that makes a difference. I don't know why it doesn't just give me a picture of one upright. But that's not even an ICBM, is it? Okay. So, for their tails were like unto serpents' tails. That had a head. And with them they do harm. You see, folks, this is what we're looking at. This is what we are looking at. So the United States is taking a different approach, is walking away from this war. This war that was literally created by NATO when they promised not to expand a single inch. They just kept expanding and expanding and expanding. Now this rift between Christian nations, aka the regular Roman Empire and the Byzantine Roman Empire, all began when the Crusaders sacked and destroyed Constantinople. They burned it with fire, fulfilling the words of the scriptures when it talks about burning that great city with fire. Well, it wasn't long after, look, Constantine, it was not long after Constantine became the emperor that he moved Rome to Constantinople. And that became the city with 7 hills on it, just like the first one did. The Russians, they are the inheritors of Constantinople, except the problem is, the Byzantine Empire, I should say. They are the inheritors of the Byzantine Empire, what's left of it. And they have not forgotten what the Crusaders did to them. How the Crusaders stabbed them in the back. And if you don't read history, how are you going to know what's going to happen in the future? If you don't read the words of the prophets, you will never know what happens in the future. In closing, I want to address something. Maybe I shouldn't, maybe I should. But there are movements all underfoot that people are trying to find new and more, I don't know if I can even find it. Did somebody delete it? Ah, this one right here. At the Master's Harvest, NCIFI, whatever that means, I have no idea. You may find this useful in your ministry. The time, 2 times, and a time and a half a time of Daniel 7:25 began in February 7, 2025. Trump is the little horn of Daniel 7, verse 8. That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And I will show you what I wrote back to him in just a minute. We can know when we are on, as he said, God's prophetic calendar. And you know right away when somebody is trying to deceive you is when they're using the word God instead of Jehovah. It is written in the book of 2nd Esdras, chapter 11, containing a prophecy that describes a line of American presidents, 4 of whom are still alive and 2 of them being kept until at the end. All of them are old men. The end is fast approaching. Ezra wrote 2nd Esdras, chapters 11, 12, and 13 many centuries ago, long before the United States existed and all of this. So he's using imaginary books to try to make his claim that Trump is somehow the little horn. So let me show you what my response is. No, Trump is not the little horn. That dubious honor goes to the Vatican. It doesn't even go to Constantinople. It goes straight to the Vatican. The only time the U.S. is talked about in the scripture is the young lion of Tarshish. So he answers, "You have made a decision without considering the evidence. Please consider the evidence." So I give him the evidence. The little horn uprooted 3 of the 10 kingdoms of the West. Those kingdoms were Ostrogoths, Heruli, and Vandals. Ostrogoths, Heruli were uprooted or plucked up by little horn power of Daniel 7, verse 7 through 8. The little horn is understood even by the Seventh-day Adventist Church and even corrupt Protestants to be Rome. This is what I posted. Both in its imperial papal phases. Daniel 8, verse 9, the plucking up of these 3 powers was done by imperial Rome, which we see in history during the time of Zeno and Justinian, both Byzantine Greek emperors of Rome. That would be the Eastern Rome. This history of being plucked up by these horns culminates with imperial Rome, giving its seat, power, and authority to papal Rome. Revelation 13, verse 2, Daniel 11, verse 31, making it more stout than its fellows. Daniel 7, verse 20, in 533, Justinian made the Western bishop head of the church and state, strengthening its influence across the then known world. Church-wise, this took care of the opposing bishops in the East who wanted to be fratres, or brothers, but the Western bishop wanted to be papa, or father, hence the title Pope, or Holy Father, as they call him. However, the 3 horns, Ostrogoths, Vandals, and Heruli, stood in the way of its state influence in the region, so Justinian helped to destroy these. The last of the 3, the Ostrogoths, were uprooted in 538 on the Roman calendar. This, of course, is common knowledge. You come across as young and unread. You should read your history. However, I suspect you might already know this, but are deflecting the spotlight from the little horn at the Vatican to turn that spotlight toward somebody else. Here is one example of the 10 kingdoms. Now, there are several examples of the 10 kingdoms, and they are similar, but they're not alike. But one of them is going to be, or one of these interpretations is going to be accurate. This might be the one, I don't know, but I'm posting this for all to see so that you will know the difference. As you can see, the Ostrogoths, Vandals, and Heruli were exterminated by the little horn. Don't be bringing your baseless argument to me when you haven't done your research. The 10 divisions of Rome. Alemannia is Germany. Those of you who live in Germany, you know exactly who Alemannia is. That's you. Visigoths, Spain. The Franks, France. Anglo-Saxon Kingdom, England. Burgundians, Switzerland. Ostrogoths, exterminated. Go look it up and see who exterminated them. Go look it up. Sueve, Portugal. That's accurate. Lombards, or Langobards, that's called by both names. They are actually northern Italy. The Vandals, they were in North Africa, I do believe, exterminated. The Heruli exterminated. Now, so he says, did you look at the evidence I have presented? And I showed him this. You err, not knowing the scriptures. There are no Ezra chapters 11 through 13 in the Tanakh Nevi'im. Now, since the Jews were entrusted with the words of Jehovah via the prophets, see Romans 3 and verse 1 and 2. Read it for yourself. Exactly as Paul said, anything added to the book of Ezra beyond the Nevi'im are not evidence at all, but are fraudulent. And I want each and every one of you to understand this. This is the reason why the so-called Book of Enoch, which is proven to be a fraud and counterfeit, is not written in the Tanakh nor in the Nevi'im. Because the Jews were entrusted with the words of Jehovah. So they had the final say when it comes to the Torah and the prophets. So you cannot add to the book of Ezra. Not one jot or tittle, and you cannot take away from the book of Ezra, not one jot or tittle. I am insulted that you actually think that I am a fool who would fall for a counterfeit text. So I'm telling you, folks, study your history, do your biblical research, study the Tanakh Nevi'im, especially because this is where the Jews got in trouble by not studying the Nevi'im, aka the prophets. Because if they would have studied the Nevi'im, aka the prophets, they would have been ready for the Moshiach the first time. Unfortunately for the Gentiles, just like the Jews, the Gentiles did not study the prophets. And at the time of the end, at the regathering of all Israel, because the Gentiles did not study the prophets and recognize Isaiah or Isaiah 60, did not recognize Isaiah 4, or is it 14? I can't remember which. Isaiah 66, did I say 66? Jeremiah 31, verses 31 through 34. Yoel 2 and Yoel 3. Zechariah 9, Zechariah 14. Just to name a few. Deuteronomy 30. No, they refuse to read that. They say that those texts are no longer valid because it gets in the way of their false narrative. But then, how then, you Gentiles, do you explain Romans 11, verse 26? All Israel shall be saved.